So now we're going to shift over to Baton Rouge and the game that happened on Saturday night. And as I mentioned, I was in attendance for this game. Me and my girlfriend drove down. As I mentioned at the top, we had some car troubles getting down, but we did make it down to Baton Rouge and, hung out with a work friend of mine. And, it was a fun atmosphere. And I was really expecting a very raucous environment. The tailgate atmosphere, if you've ever been to Baton Rouge, is very, very good. Part of it has to do with just how the stadiums and field and everything is set up. It was very cool. We went and saw Mike, and then we get into the game, and the game very quickly turned into a blowout. And I talked at length about this game in the preview episode. And in my opinion, I thought the two keys were the offensive line and our ability to block and not have Jalen get pressure when they're rushing just four guys, and Jalen's legs. And I'm not going to say that the offensive line piece didn't matter, but I think it didn't matter as much as it could have due to the fact that Jalen's legs were the difference, right? In this game, Jalen Milroe was Superman. There's no other way to put it. He, with the ball in his hands, he's absolutely elite. For anybody who's seen Jalen run the ball, you know this, right? I'm not speaking out of turn when I say that Milroe can do things with the ball in his hands that most quarterbacks just can't and most players just can't, right? And that really showed in this game. Jalen finishes with 12 rushes for 185 yards and 4 touchdowns. One of those rushes was a 72-yard rush off a zone read, and actually that one was off a design. And, you have Booker come across the block, set the edge. He cuts it in, 72 yards to the house untouched. He's out running safeties and corners that have an angle, right? Milroe, again, with the ball in his hands, is absolutely incredible. And I thought that it really showed in this game. In my opinion, this game, as much as, for anybody that listens to these episodes, I talked in the Missouri game about how in that first half, a lot of us were calling for, hey, it looks like Milroe's hurt. The only thing we know to say is he's not playing like we expect, so he must be hurt. And in the second half, he really kind of silenced some people of maybe he's not hurt because he played so well in the second half. In my opinion, this LSU game tells me he had to have at least been kind of hurt because what we saw in this LSU game was a different quarterback than what we even saw in that second half of the Missouri game. Milroe's willingness to run the ball and their willingness to even call the designed runs, and not just the design runs inside the goal, the red zone where you have empty backfield, guard pull. We've seen that all year, but to actually call runs where, you're first down or second down, middle of the field, and you're calling a Jalen run, right? We saw a lot more of that in this game. You also saw a little better deep ball from Jalen. It felt like in some of the Tennessee game or the South Carolina game, something was just a little bit off, and I don't know if he had something tweaked, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to pretend to be one. It just feels like something was slightly off. I don't know what the answer was, but it's going to be very difficult to convince me that something wasn't off, because the Milroe which we saw in this LSU game was awesome, right? He did miss one deep ball that was to Emmanuel Henderson, which he had that would have been a touchdown. His other deep ball to Ryan Williams, I think probably should have been a catch and should have been a touchdown. If it had not been raining, I think Ryan comes down with that ball. I think that has to do with the fact that the ball was so wet, and Ryan did have to outstretch, and I think with the wetness of everything, he just isn't able to contain it as he goes to the ground, right? But he has 2 deep shots. Like I said, one of them was a little bit of an overthrow. One of them was a tiny, tiny bit overthrow, but I think Ryan still catches that ball if the ball is dry. But in general, I thought that Jalen just had control of this game, because Alabama does not need him to do what LSU needs Garrett Nussmeier to do, right? We talked about Garrett Nussmeier being somebody that LSU is not a running team, and LSU wants to step back and throw the ball 40, 50 times. In the rain, they still threw the ball 42 times, right? In the rain, they still left Nussmeier out there down 42-6, right? I mean, this is a situation where, in my opinion, That's a problem, right? If I'm an LSU fan, I'm very upset that they left Nussmeier in this game. I attribute it to similar to like the Tyrone Prothro injury against Florida. Alabama's up big in that game. Prothro gets injured. In my opinion, whether you're up big or down big, why do you have your starters in a blowout? Like, nothing's going to change. Brian Kelly was, seen as, commenting to the officials, the game's basically over and they're still sending 8. You still got your starting quarterback out there. You've got your starting receivers out there. If you've still got Nussmeier and Kyron Lacey out there, then we can do whatever the heck we want to do. And even then, we can still do whatever we want to do. But, like, why are you still throwing your starting quarterback out there? Why didn't you just run the ball and say, hey, this game's over, we'll deal with the next time? It was just a very weird situation with how the end of this game played. But I thought the beginning of this game and how Alabama just took control early, took the crowd completely out of the game. Part of that had to do with the weather. I thought that there was a couple of moments where, even though the weather was going, that if Alabama had just let their foot off the gas for a split second and let LSU get back in the game, the crowd would have been back into it, because the fans that left early, like super early, it really felt like we're in kind of the non-student sections, where it felt like those fans maybe either were going to the concourse to drink, or maybe they had some like food section, or I'm not fully sure about all the amenities at Tiger Stadium, but it really felt like those fans may have just like went into a different area. But then when Alabama really busted it open, right? When Alabama gets up 28-6, and the big play was Alabama gets stopped on 4th down and then immediately gets the blitz home and sacks Nussmeier with a fumble, gets the ball back and scores, right? That play, in my opinion, was kind of the nail in the coffin for LSU. It was the situation when all the LSU fans really started streaming for the exits, right? By the end of this game, there were more Alabama fans in the stadium than LSU fans. And this is a pretty insane sight, because I'm not sure how the TV broadcast caught it, but Alabama only had one part of the upper deck where we were at, up at the very, very top, maybe like the last 6 or 7 rows, maybe 10 rows in the upper deck in one section. And then they had some lower bowl seats down where the band was, and it was not a ton, right? But LSU fans, it looked worse than a COVID game, right? There were just not fans in this stadium. Maybe 5,000 fans by the time this game ended. And that was something that I just didn't expect to see in Tiger Stadium, right? Obviously, like I said, the weather definitely had an impact on this game. The amount that Alabama was up had an impact on this game. But I thought that Alabama's offense and defense's ability just to take the crowd completely out of this game, and what Milroe was able to do with his legs, was the difference, right? I cannot go without talking about the defense, though. I would love to credit what Kane Womack has done, right? He got a ton of criticism after the Vanderbilt game, and rightly so. He had done a poor job preparing the team and having them ready to play Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt outcoached us. There's no other way to say it. We lost that game because we were outcoached. However, since then, the turnaround in which the defense has done, and I would even go as far as to say that Tennessee game that we lost, the defense was not the reason why, right? The Missouri game, they get the shutout. In this LSU game, they give up just 13 points, really 6, and then, Nussmeier gets a touchdown with 7 seconds left in the game. At the end of the day, what Kane Womack has done with the defense in the last few weeks has been incredible. And that's been even with some injuries. And there was another injury in this game, Q Robinson, from what we've heard. It sounds like he's going to be out for the rest of the year, maybe a broken forearm. But, you have an injury to Keon Sabb, and you replace him in the back end with Bray Hubbard. And Bray Hubbard now has 2 interceptions in his absence and has looked incredible in most of the games, or in the 2 games that he's played since. I just think that what Kane Womack has done with the defense, what he's done with the secondary, he's mixing up pressures a lot more. What he's showing pre-snap versus post-snap has been a lot better. There also was a comment that Deontay Lawson made that apparently in the warm-up or the lead-up to this game, Austin Mack was mimicking on the scout team Garrett Nussmeier. And the interception in which Deontay Lawson caught in this game, Austin Mack simulated at the goal line as well, and Deontay Lawson picked it, right? So it's even a standpoint of the film and everything was coming together to the point that the exact play that the interception was called on, he was able to get one in practice as well. So they're seeing exactly what the opposing team is going to do, right? It was just very clear that this team was prepared. This team knew what LSU was going to throw at them, and this team knew exactly what they needed to do to win it, right? The one kind of hiccup of this team, you could have said, is there still were a couple of penalties that, in a closer game potentially could have been costly. Like you had a penalty which stopped you from getting a kick. The kick ended up getting missed, and again, it was rainy and windy. I'm not super concerned about that, but they caused you to end up having to punt. There were a couple of other penalties in this game that I think that you really just need to kind of clean up. But by and large, on the road in the hostile environment that could have been in Tiger Stadium, awesome. Absolutely incredible. I will say that if you have not seen the closing call that Chris Stewart did on the radio, check it out. I know that Ryan Phillips on Twitter posted it. I retweeted it earlier today. Just go check it out. The Crimson Tide Sports Network guys have done a great job. Obviously, Chris is absolutely incredible. He's been with basketball and taking over football this year, and it was absolutely hilarious, kind of his call to end this game.